Welcome to today's webinar entitled Managing Capital Planning and Competing Priorities. My name is Billy Zadig, Manager of Special Programs for APA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to the APA webpage under the Continuous Learning tab later today. Professional continuing education certificates are being offered for today's program. Those who indicated they wanted a certificate at registration and meet the requirements will receive certificates later this afternoon. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your questions in the chat box and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by our presenter. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Curtis Lodlick. Curtis, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Billy. Welcome everybody to the webinar. We're going to be talking, as Billy said, about managing capital planning and competing priorities. So just to go over a agenda here, we'll be looking at, just want to do a quick little introduction, and then we're going to be talking a little bit about kind of what we'll call setting the table, setting up and moving on to kind of winning that competition for capital, get into prioritization, telling your story, and what's the catch associated with it. So without further ado, introductions. Just wanted to get a chance to introduce myself. My name's Curtis Lodlick. I'm the Vice President of Operations with Roth IAMS, professional engineer, certified energy manager. Been working and collaborating with many different institutions for the last 20 years all across North America, and actually even into the Caribbean as well, and helping out both whether it comes from the energy efficiency side of things to capital planning, and helping out with facilities trying to understand their capital needs. So just to kind of start off, start off with what I call setting the table, right? And when I say Roth IAMS, stands for IAM stands for Integrated Asset Management Strategies. So what does integrated asset management mean? Well, I mean, when we're talking about integrated asset management of your facilities and infrastructure, really, we're looking at, I guess we'll call it three different main aspects. Your capital planning excellence, obviously for your capital renewal. We look about your operational side of things, where we're looking at obviously managing, maintaining your facilities, and then looking at what we'll call performance excellence, right? Where we start getting into the performance of your facilities, whether we're talking about energy performance, functionality, space usage, a lot of other things trying to incorporate in there. And so when we talk about integrated asset management, we're really talking about finding that sweet spot where all those interact, and really trying to focus on how we can get the most benefit from all of those. Hence the topic of today's webinar. So I want to kind of move a little bit towards talking about winning the competition for capital. So right now, when we talk about integrated asset management, well, where's our focus now? Many organizations tend to be fairly siloed in these areas, where you've got groups, say your sustainability group focused on the sustainability initiatives. They're working somewhat independently from your capital planning group, and then you have your operation boots on the ground. We're in kind of a situation where we've got a lot of groups trying to compete to make changes within your facility to help upkeep meeting their mandated goals and their objectives, where everyone's usually working independently, competing against capital. A great example is a case where maybe you have a capital renewal of some equipment, up on a roof, and that equipment just got changed from a capital renewal perspective, right as your energy efficiency team was looking at replacing that equipment with something more efficient. So it leaves you in, a little bit of a scenario of, well, now we have brand new equipment that we just bought and paid for, and we have another group that could have made some strides towards some of the organization sustainability goals. So really, it's trying to looking at breaking those silos and having more interaction. So when we talk about maybe what I'll call all the competing factors when we're looking at our buildings, and this is kind of our little kind of like pyramid hierarchy of data that you're gonna have and you're gonna be trying to filter through. So I mean, you've got kind of starting with your basic inventory operations, right? We've got to keep the buildings functional, keep them working. Then you've got your condition side of things, right? If major components are failing, it's not really going to mean that you're going to be able to, operate your facility. And we've got our code, environmental concerns, followed with functionality, and then our sustainability factors. And they're all of these items are items that we're looking at how we can maintain, and they all have a demand for capital needs and funding application. So where are we coming from? Where are we currently set up right now? Right now, we're, in a lot of cases, there's a lot of organizations that are working through single year budgets. And a lot of this focus is from the bottom up. Where what I mean by that is it might even be single asset focused, and not looking at the whole picture. And often when we're prioritization, right? There's priority in a lot of instances, could be political, could be who's yelling out the loudest for their needs. And in a lot of cases, what we've also seen in the past is a lot of the prioritization may also be a little what I call discipline biased by the decision makers. A good example of that is, if the individual that's putting together a lot of the capital planning, maybe they have more of an electrical background. So they may tend to start to lean towards more of the electrical items in the building and maybe ignore some of the architectural components that when they're trying to decide on the priority of things. So something that, some scenarios of where we sit. So, what are the results of this? Well, we tend to have a lack of data, and future planning has kind of resulted in practices and structures that don't accurately reflect the needs of the facility and infrastructure. Often we have some inflexibility in the use or redirection of funds, because we didn't make plans flexible enough. Often you can get stuck with, well, the funds have to go towards a certain aspect. Large portions of budgets are being taken up by reactive renewals and repairs, so very highly reactive. Kind of starts to this starts to. Oops, sorry, jumped ahead accidentally. This starts to lead to underperforming buildings whose kind of overall condition starts to slip. Right, so we start our facilities start getting in worse and worse shape. Kind of the product of this results in limited reporting potential and challenges to rate a program's success. All in all, it's left to our clients looking for better answers often. So why do we need to evolve? Well, arguably, existing practices aren't working efficiently. We also expect that our infrastructure will continue to deteriorate at the same or faster pace than as it continues to age. Access to capital is always limited and competitive, both from budget approval as well as budget allocation between competing departments. We're also losing a vast amount of knowledge about our assets, and work completed, both from the loss of experienced workforce and from inadequate or inaccessible records. I'm sure there are a lot that are experiencing an aging workforce that has a lot of knowledge within their heads, and I'll say found that numerous times throughout the years, where it becomes very important of how are we going to capture that information. And kind of to add to that, we're starting to see more regulation, stricter building codes, that's becoming a lot more cumbersome and complicated. So what's the goal here, right? Really the goal, we need to develop a strategy, that's going to allow the organization to improve the quality, of their built environment. And, it has to be done through, effective, efficient allocation of capital and maintenance dollars. We have to be smart with how we're spending the limited funding that we have to do. So this is where I want to kind of introduce a little more into a multi-year planning process, right? Really, like a multi-year planning process is based on kind of a reoccurring process on a consistent data across a client's portfolio, right? So, a set process for all buildings increases the consistency, of the data set, leaving fewer holes, or decision-making pitfalls. Various data points, can be prioritized based on various factors, such as importance of each system, safety, or other related priorities. So really, when we're looking at this life cycle, really it starts off with where are you sitting now? You need to look at that initial, we'll say, self-reflection of where does your organization sit now? And then look at that future state of, obviously, where do we want to go? What do we want to get to? If we're talking about our facilities, well, how do we want to maintain our facilities? Where do we want them to be? Once you know where you are and where you want to go, then the next step is getting the data that you need. What are, if I want to get, in order to get from where we are now to where we want to go, what information do I need to have in order to help me make the decisions that I need to make? And then asking the question, so why is this important to me? Why is this important to you? Understand those questions first, and then you can start to build your plan. You put your plan together, and then you need to put your plan into work. So you got to put that plan into action, and then again, reviewing, did I get the results that I expected? And then start the process again. Where am I now? Where do I want to go? And kind of continue through for your multi-year planning process. So it's kind of how you go through that journey as you go through the building and your portfolio. So, and what is a multi-year plan? really a multi-year plan, we're looking at, typically a 3 or 5 year plan that's detailing the specific projects that you're going to undertake. So this is where we're looking further out than, as a lot of typically we're scrambling to try to get our next year, and we're working year by year. When we start looking further into the future, 3-5 year plan, this is where we can start to try to incorporate other aspects besides, say, capital renewal. This is where we start to look at what does the future look like from our energy efficiency side of things. What does it look like from our space usage, functionality side of things, and try to start to incorporate that into a multi-year plan. So a lot of cases, you're going to have it's going to initially be based on condition assessment data, and then, as I said, as well as other expert level assessments, such as an energy audit, or maybe it's an accessibility assessment. You want to collect all of those different data points in order to evaluate those together. It's got to include considerations for your business. And I put in brackets political factors. So you do have to take into some consideration, obviously, some of, say, the direction of the institution, and some, maybe there are some key components that need to be there over others. It also needs to be built based on your known levels of funding and projections for future funding. We can't take it and just simply build a plan that has unlimited funding associated with it. This needs to have some consideration on what is realistic funding. You can look at, see what sort of trends you have, what you might want to ask for versus also what you are typically likely to get. And finally, with this multi-year plan, it's something that's presented. It needs to be presented to senior leadership and stakeholders for approval each year. So just like when we talk about the previous slide with the multi-year planning cycle, you make a multi-year plan and then you're going to have to update it each year. However, the difference is you're not starting from scratch. Like when you're looking often year to year, it's like, okay, I threw together everything for the next year, and now I'm starting this all over again, trying to dig up all of the information. You've got an initial plan together. You just need to make sure that you update the information that you have, because maybe you got done a few more projects that you didn't expect that you would get done, you got funding for. So maybe it adjusts it so you can do more. So it's why you've got to make sure that you update, and then you, by the end, get approval each year and start the process, continue on with the process and updating again. So, what is still continuing with what is a multi-year plan? It's updated throughout the year, because you need to be reactive for changes in priority, changes in available funding. What happens if you have a major system failure at one of your facilities, or a number of them, that might change out what needs to get done? And then there's also changes in project costs. I think the last few years have shown us how widely the costs of projects can start to range, and have been influenced through inflation and other aspects, where stuff that we might have planned for a few years back costs a lot more now. So there's less that we can perhaps get done. You also need to make sure that you want to take this plan and we want to refresh it annually. Another one of the big items is, the actual work completed. That's probably one of the biggest things to make sure that we keep track of, is what was done and what hasn't been done. because that's going to impact your planning for the next year. And it's good to do that as things are getting completed. Also need to refresh, what's your confirmation of how much funding? And as I said, multi-year, we're starting off, we may know next year's funding amount, but we are predicting the future years. So as we get to the second, third, fourth year in the plan, we need to confirm the funding, as well as updating asset information, and also what are your available internal resources. These things can change during the time. So the next piece I want to talk a little bit about is a multi-year planning tool. So what is it, right? It's a multi-year planning tool. It's either, in a lot of cases, it could be as simple as it's a spreadsheet, or it could be functionality within a capital planning software. I know a lot of the institutions have capital planning software that they use, to help select, I'm going to say the facility condition assessment recommendations, for inclusion and exclusion within the 3 to 5 year plan. How does it work? Well, you begin with obviously an extract of all of the relevant data that's collected, which is going to be far greater than the need. Like the need is always greater than the available funding. You need to align this with your long-term space and program needs. That's another big piece in there, because in some cases there may be capital renewal activities that may not be necessary to do because of the space and program use is going to change. So we want to make sure that you align any of the planning associated with that. Then we got to integrate, additional facility data beyond the 5-year condition data that's based on visual observation. It also is going to provide justification for inclusion and exclusion of each identified item. So if you have a long list of items, like this is where you're going to be using a multi-year planning tool to help you justify why you are including items in the plan and why you are not including items in the plan. That justification can be pretty important when trying to access any additional capital. And this also, the way I would say is, this can include kind of a multivariable prioritization, which is a way, what I call an MVP. It's based on organizational specific objectives, and enhanced utilization. So I mean, with kind of that last piece there, want to talk a little bit about prioritization. How do we go when we're building a multi-year capital plan? How are we doing our prioritization? So this, this involves, picking what needs are included in the actual plan, right? That's why are we prioritizing? Well, we need to pick. Typically, this has been done as simple things: urgent, high, medium, low. What happens when you run out of money in the middle of a category? Which high is higher than high? Like when you've got a bunch of items that are listed as critically important and you don't have enough money to do all of them, well, how are you choosing between them? So this is, often we've seen this in the past based on condition assessment data and the condition criteria, or more of a traditional risk management scenario. So with the traditional risk management scenario, we're kind of looking at here where, like, this is a common one we've seen around, where we're looking at the consequence of failure, the likelihood of failure. You've got ratings that are given, and it helps. Okay, well, I've got a rating of 5 and a rating of 5, so I've got my most important items here, And then I've got the next color shade of red that or the next most important. Do I even get out of there before I have to start to make decisions about what's in and what's out? And how do I, on a very simplified risk management aspect of this, how am I determining where to cut things off? It's the challenge with this general approach. So we like to look at this as it's beyond just risk management. Because if you think about with the risk management and capital planning, we've just considered really only capital items that we're looking at future capital renewal or repairing deferred maintenance. We haven't considered any other factors. Well, how are we going to consider energy efficiency? How are we going to consider accessibility and programming needs? We need to see it go beyond just risk management. So, factors, as I said, program needs, sustainability, what political items need to be considered in there. What are the, say, community needs? What are the needs of of those on campus? And what others? There can be many others. So when we're talking about multivariable prioritization, right? So this is a very collaborative process with all stakeholders, across an organization. So again, facilities, finance, other users, different things. We're really, what we're trying to work on developing is a matrix that includes what's important to your organization. So when we talk about a multivariable prioritization, in many cases, there may be some aspects that are common from organization to organization, but the whole of it is very unique to your organization and your business. So, it may not be the same across across, we'll say, multiple colleges and universities in the state. This is specific to how you run your business. So, the common items, as I mentioned, may include building asset, element level categories that are scored and weighed. It also allows stakeholders to start to understand how priority score was calculated. So it's also includes easy updates as organizational goals evolve, and generally, includes both aspects of risk management as well as other factors. So I wanted to kind of pull up just a couple examples here of what when we're talking about building out a multivariable prioritization, right? This is where maybe we're looking at a building category, a building type. What sort of building type or type of infrastructure is it? What's a relative weighting for it? And then looking at, well, what sort of subcategories and what sort of weighting do we have within the subcategory? So the idea is, an academic building, that's a classroom and lab, academic research building, residence building, infrastructure subsurface, infrastructure on the surface. This is just kind of a very, very high level. And what's the relative difference in importance are these buildings to your organization? And so this is an example. This list, the subcategory list, could be as long as you feel it needs to be, and the scores don't necessarily need to be a 1 to 10. You could be taking a 1 out of 20, 1 out of 100. All depends on what you want to set as your relative difference in importance. So you can look at it from building type. You could look at it from element as well. You could look at it depending on, are we looking at, what's the difference, the relative importance from carpet to roof to plumbing fixtures to to your air conditioning, your chiller. You could look at it from a specific element type category, or even within an element category, and as we relate to some of risk management. So what's our consequence of failure, right? Is the recommendation tied in with fire life safety? Is it going to result in a full campus shutdown, multi-building shutdown, partial building shutdown, just a program interruption, or is it just a nuance? Again, you start to try to build out what you can with different categories. And again, another category that often could be in there might be on sustainability, energy efficiency. It might be having a weighting overall of that category and subcategories, kind of indicating what the could be, whether there's energy efficiency opportunity. If we want to, if we've got goals for greenhouse gas reductions, well then, that could be a piece that is in there as well. This is not something that's limited to just a couple categories. This gets built out to kind of look at how you evaluate, how you're going to evaluate your facilities, and infrastructure as a whole, and what aspects are important to, like I said, your business, your institution. So that's kind of just a little overview of multivariable prioritization, because what you would do is you build that prioritization, and then you can send in a then essentially it's going to basically give you a score. For every recommendation you have, you're going to have a score. We'll call it like a percentage. And with that percentage, it's going to give you that opportunity then to start to rank those items. So we go to telling your story next. So this is where we're kind of looking at a roadmap, right? So what is it, right? Kind of part of the multi-planning tool is providing a step-by-step review of how each relevant need is addressed. Putting this roadmap together is something that you want to do in layperson language. It's something you're trying to put together, for if you're a facilities individual, you've been working on your capital plan. You want to get a roadmap together that's meant for those non-facility stakeholders to understand, so that you're speaking the same language as everyone else. It's where you're going to try to help put this together to help explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, so that others understand it, so that it helps with that acquisition of funding. So how does this work, right? You want to link all other areas of your planning tools so you can stay at a high level, or deep dive to look at specific projects in a specific building. So you want to be able to kind of link your areas, and you want to answer the question, how did we get from there to here? So if I've made a plan and I've put my plan together, how did I get there? How did I make the decisions I did in order to get to where I wanted to go? So what I've got here is a roadmap, say for a 3-year capital plan, where we look at the initial count of, we had over 5 years there were 1,000 recommendations that needed to be completed, and that totaled over $11 million. We don't have $11 million to spend. So how do I get down to what I need to do within the 3-year capital spend that I do have available? So this is where we look at starting to kind of break down even some of the criteria for some of the decision making that was made. So, at first we look at what's included, what's the total number of recommendations, how many of them we included, how many of them we excluded. Again, this is kind of a roadmap for a summary of how we made some of the decisions that we did, so that it's easy for someone to understand. So life safety systems in critical poor condition, important, we kind of need to get those done, so we've included those. However, we've also looked at, again, this is again where we're talking about, different actions that are happening, potential closures, buildings that are potentially being closed. So why invest in a bunch of capital renewal on buildings that we are going to be shutting down? So those indicated here say have been excluded. Studies, maybe there were some further investigations and studies that were done. These would tend to be a little more, we'll call it lower capital items that actually could be done under the maintenance budget. So that, again, that got excluded from the capital plan. Priority, right? Depending on what we've done for priority, we've probably eliminated a number of them that are considered more of a low or medium range priority. Again, going through our multivariable prioritization scheme, there's probably a number of things that came out with a lower score that we were able to, they're just not as critical, and we had to make some decisions, because you could see that's in this example, that's 625. It's typically something like that is the, is where the lion's share ends up. Then we've got also, say, roofing consultant recommendations, right? So this is where we're starting to take stuff from other information gathered from other areas, right? So there's 20 recommendations there, but there's roofing deferrals. So maybe there's also some recommendations that contradict the roofing study that could be deferred. So we've taken out a few there. Again, maybe you have some specific programs, right? We say you got a boiler program. Well, then we've narrowed down for the highest priorities associated with this boiler program to, say, improve, replace some of the boilers, or board, and then again, when we talk about political, just as an example here, board priority, windows. So, maybe that's something that has been identified as a priority from another aspect within the infrastructure and the campus, and so it's something that we've indicated in there. Building staff feedback. So, maybe there are a few things that get pushed forward because of feedback from operations or some of the occupants that are going to make a difference. And then energy opportunities, especially energy opportunities. This kind of is where we tie in energy opportunities for energy consuming equipment that's in critical poor condition, including some of those. And then you've got your last few things where you just plain have insufficient budget available. So you've kind of identified that there's a few things that are on that list that didn't land in some of these categories, we couldn't do. So there's 91 out of 1,000 recommendations that we can do, and we have a total capital spend of $2.35 million. So really, it's this presents kind of a clear little decision matrix of how did we get to where we, what we were choosing to have within our plan, and putting it in simple terms. So what's the catch? So none of this works if you don't have an effective strategy in place to acquire, manage, and update what we say consistent, defensible asset data on a regular basis. You need to find where your sweet spot is for always, because more data is not necessarily a good thing. There can be too much. So, investment in both time and capital in data collection, scope of the assignment, type, quality of data, to be delivered, being cautious that, yeah, like I said, more is not always better. It can also lead to a lot of what we guys will call noise in the background within the data set, and more intensive, more expensive upkeep of the data. So in order to be successful, it's also required engagement of all stakeholders in the process, from decision makers, project managers, program providers, and other user groups, which will bring along a different way to validate their perspectives on the matter. This may have to be undertaken across multiple departments, depending on how you're set up, but you really got to have that collaboration amongst your team. And when you're looking at annual updates, right, these are made to the, you want to make updates to your process and your tools each year. So again, you want to review and update your MVP or priority matrix, just so you understand, because things change. Are we still evaluating things the same way we thought we were going to last year? Again, we want to adjust the data set based on any newly completed information. So maybe there's new information through a facility condition assessment. Maybe there's new information through an energy audit. We need to update and make adjustments, as well as any in-depth annual revisions to specific projects selected. You want to reconcile any projects from last year's previous plan. You need to make consideration of the previous assumptions and priorities, as well as adjusting based on your current objectives, because we all know those objectives can change, right? They can change throughout the year. So how do we win that competition for capital? So really what we come down to is we develop a multi-year capital planning process. We look at trying to maintain a comprehensive prioritization system, build a roadmap for each year, and then acquire, manage, update consistent and defensible data, and then repeat the process. A lot of this is tied in with the planning process and making sure that you're updating. There's so many instances where I think we've seen in the past where no one's entirely sure, no one's kept up to date with, I guess what I'll call it is the box of receipts for all the projects that were done throughout the year, and then it's a scramble at the end of the year to try to update, well, what's been done, what hasn't been done, and what do we need to do for next year's plan. Really important to be right on top of updating information as it happens. It could be some of the biggest benefit, and actually a big time saver than the scramble and the additional stress that happens at the end of the year. Which does kind of bring me towards the end of the presentation here, where we have some time for some questions.
It always helps if I unmute myself. We're getting questions about, will the PowerPoint be available? And for everyone who's in attendance here, yes. When you receive your follow-up email tomorrow afternoon, it'll give you a link, and then you can go in and request a copy of the presentation slides, and I will send them to you. So our first question is, we have the state give us recommendations to replace or repair buildings, but we never get enough money to cover the cost of the repair or replacement. What is your recommendation for prioritizing?
I think kind of in that case is I would look at, again, kind of taking to the, when we kind of talked a little bit about the multivariable prioritization is they may have some recommendations. And of course, as we said, there's a limited amount of capital. So this is where you have a case of you have more recommendations than what you have capital available. So this is where you have to start to look at a more complex decision matrix, such as, like I said, the multivariable prioritization, to help kind of determine between all of these facilities and all of these actions, how am I going to choose? So being able to look at what's, where even some of your goals are combined with kind of some of the outside goals, and figure out what the right weighting is associated with that. And it can help kind of limit down to where are we going to spend the capital that we have. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, I have a second question that's very similar to that. Is there any part of this process that Roth-IM specializes in?
We've actually helped work with a number of clients in, one, helping them develop their multivariable prioritization. We also help out with a lot of the initial, I guess, say, data collection, would be facility condition assessments or energy audits or accessibility assessments. And we've also worked with a number of clients in helping them build out their capital plan. Where, there's a lot of organizations that have staff available that's their role to do. And then there are a lot of organizations, even some smaller ones, that don't have the resources to really try to keep everything up to date. So we've often been able to step in and help try to keep up to date and help walk them through the whole planning process.
Okay, well, that seems to be the end of our questions. I know that you've given us a lot of things to think about, so
Billy, I'll add that in the last slide in the presentation that will be accessible for everybody, we've got a little QR code on there that can take you to a section on our website that has a lot of other publications, webinar information, and a blog that we have, just for if you're looking for more educational information on capital planning and some of this. Certainly we've got some extra information that could certainly be of use and of interest for individuals.
Okay, we had another question come up and ask has anyone found a capital software that easily rolls up capital renewal needs from FCARs and other sources? Is there software out there that does that?
I would say there's actually a number of software out there. The one that we work with the most is called SlamCap, and it's a capital planning software that certainly has built into it the structure for a multivariable prioritization. Also takes care of, as you create projects and complete projects, to automatically update some of that data. You replace a roof, you say, hey, this has been, we completed this, great, it's no longer a 1970 roof, it's now a 2023 roof. And gives you an opportunity to kind of help keep some of the data up to date. So that's the software that we use the most often, but there are many others out there.
Okay, our next question is there a template to get the narrative started? I believe that I'm starting from scratch.
I guess what I would suggest is if maybe reach out and we could probably get a better understanding of what you're looking for getting started, and maybe able to help point you in the right direction.
Okay. We have another question that I will be sending directly to you to answer. So it looks like that we are at the end of our questions. So Curtis, thank you so much for taking time today to do this presentation. I'm getting great comments through the chat box here about the presentation, so thank you.
Great.
And
Thanks
always,
a lot.
to our attendees, thank you for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule to be with us today. So until next time, be safe, stay healthy, and let's be kind to one another. Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.
Thanks. Bye.